Right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Audit Committee. We have a couple of new members today. I think to note that Councillor Murphy has replaced Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Murphy is here.
Sadly, Chair, without jumping the agenda, I need to tender Councillor Murphy's apologies.
Wow.
Down with the bad ruling, what followed.
That's disappointing. Never mind. So Councillor Murphy can't be with us, but just to note that Councillor Murphy has replaced Councillor Dickinson on this committee for the ensuing council year. And we have apologies for absence, Andrea?
Just from Councillor Murphy, Chair.
No. And Peter Topping, who's our independent co-opted member, is running late, so he'll be with us in the next 5 to 10 minutes, so he'll arrive later on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm going to leave by noon as well.
Okay, thank you. So we'll make note of that. Okay, so that doesn't affect quoracy at all, does it, Andrea? Okay, that's good. Okay, moving on the agenda. Item 3, the minutes of the last meeting. Now, I don't propose, as usual, to go through these line by line, but just to ask if anybody has any comments or has noticed anything which isn't accurate in there. No. So can we take them as a true record? I'm taking that as the nods around the room as a yes. Okay, thank you. Item number 4, disclosure of members' interests. Unless already entered on the Council's register of members' interests, members are required, as always, to disclose any personal interest, which includes any disclosable pecuniary interest they may have in items included on this agenda for this meeting in accordance with the Code of Conduct adopted by the Council on 4th of July 2012. And they are reminded that if they have any personal interest of any prejudicial nature, pardon me, as defined under paragraph 17 of the Code of Conduct, they must not participate in any discussion or vote on any matter that must leave the room. So this is a standard item. So if anybody knows of anything at the present time that they might it'd be worth mentioning now. No, that's good. We'll move on. Okay, item 5, getting into the business of the first part of the meeting, the reports of the Interim Executive Director of Finance and Section 151 Officer. 5.1 is the arrangements for the appointment of the local auditor. So 5.1.
Should I depart at this point, really? Because clearly I am the local auditor as it stands at the moment.
Well,
you might want me out of the room when you're debating it.
I think that it would be perfectly okay, because we're only talking about the discussion around the arrangements, Cameron, rather than
I still personally think,
if you would feel compromised,
transparency point of view, it'd be better if I left the room just briefly.
If you would feel happier to do that, I'm happy for you to leave. Although I think that we're really only talking about the arrangements, so it isn't actually, wouldn't really affect you.
Better safe than sorry.
Better safe than sorry. We'll give you a shout when we're finished. Okay. Okay. So, who's presenting this? Is Jan on the line?
That's me, Chair.
Hello, Jan.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can see you loud and clear, Jan. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, so this is a report which has been brought to the Committee for Information. The actual decision on the arrangements for the appointment of the external auditor will be made at County Council in January, but the report is before you today to allow the committee an opportunity to make any observations before that decision is made. So briefly, the Mazars were appointed as the council's external auditors, and their term runs until March 2023. So we are not looking to replace the external auditor anytime soon. However, we do need to make a decision about whether, when the time comes to replace the external auditors, we are going to directly procure external auditors or appoint them via the public sector audit appointments who have been designated by government to administer the national framework. So the report just explains that some of the background to that, some of the legislative framework, and basically the recommendation on value for money grounds as well as administrative ease is that we should opt into the national arrangements, and that is the recommendation that will be going forward to Council in January. So as I said, if members of the committee have any observations about that or any questions, then this is your opportunity to make your views known. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Okay, so this is basically what's going to go forward to the council, but obviously it's our duty, I think, to explore this and try to unpack what's behind this this decision to go with this method of appointing an external auditor, which, let's be honest, is a very crucial role for the governance of the council. So I note that it said the approach ensures independence. The council will take no part in the appointment process. It will deliver better value for money, lower administrative costs, and we don't have to undertake and manage our own procurement process. And those are the big arguments, I think, I'm fair and it's right in saying, Jan, in why you think this is the right way to go. So I'm going to open it up to the committee as to whether you think that those are strong arguments and whether there's anything. I think Councillor Oliver, you just pipped in there with the first hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I fully support this. I think it's you know, for the reasons set out in the report, it's good to do it this way. I think I think having an independent body making the appointment is a good principle as well, because then there's no there can be no undue influence by either members or officers in that appointment process. So I'm fully behind that. And as I understood it in 2017, when we became the administration, the rationale for doing it the other way was to save money, but that didn't actually happen. So you know, no money was saved. So I suspect on that basis, it's probably worth doing it this way as well.
Okay, Councillor Townsend, have a question.
Yes, just actually to echo those comments, because I've been on this committee since 2017, and I actually thought it was very odd that we weren't part of this grouping previously in terms of appointing the external auditor. You know, I see risk in lots of things, and I see there's risk in being able to choose your own auditor, which obviously this takes that risk out. I also see the value for money saving as well. As Councillor Oliver said, we switched from the previous system to this system for the right reasons. That certainly dealt with my concerns in 2017, and so I'd be very supportive of sticking with it and keeping this, what I think is a more transparent approach to appointing our external auditors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. It certainly seems that when the council wasn't part of this arrangement, we were a bit of an outlier. Would that be the case, Jan? The majority of councils of our size and type involved in this arrangement?
Yes, Chair, that would be fair to say, and increasingly as time has gone on, fewer and fewer councils have directly procured their own external audit contracts.
Okay. Daljit, the Chief Executive has a point.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to comment, I may be wrong, but I don't think we actually changed in 2017. Kevin may be able to correct me. I think we originally, the arrangements were for 3 authorities. I think the 3 North Tyne authorities actually put the arrangements in place some time before that. And then we, after I became Chief Executive, we went back to this model, which was felt to be more appropriate. I just think for clarity, I think it wasn't 2017 that we made that change. I think it was when Stephen Mason was the Chief Exec that arrangement was put in place.
Oh, okay, thank you for that. Okay, well, I think it's a fairly simple paper, Jan, and it just clearly outlines actually what the process is going to be and gives us the reasons for it. I have sensed a certain degree of support around the room. Nobody's voiced any concerns about this, and most people seem to think that the idea of the independence and certainly the value for money savings are well worth pursuing. So do we take a vote on this, whether we support this one? I think we've been asked to agree to accept the invitation to become an opt-in authority, etc., and agree Section 151 officers complete the required paperwork in order to make the necessary arrangements. So I think as a committee, can I have a proposer for that? Do we do that? Councillor Oliver, and a seconder, Councillor Jackson. And a quick vote, a show of hands. Will we agree this? Thank you. I think that's unanimous. So thank you, Jan. That one's passed. I think we need to get Cameron back into the room now. We'll just pause for a second when the external auditor returns. Okay, thank you, Cameron, for stepping outside shortly for that part. We're moving on now to agenda item 5B, which again I think is Jan, and it's the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review Report for the period 1st of April to 30th September 21. So Jan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out Treasury management activities and performance for that period for the first half of this financial year. I did present quite a detailed report at the last meeting of the committee on Treasury management operations to the 31st of March of this year, and this report is very much in a similar. So I don't propose to go through it in detail, but we do have Andy Stewart, who manages our treasury management function, on the line, who can assist with any questions that members have. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Jan. I think this one's best just opened up to the floor. So, anybody, obviously we've all read this report. Has anybody got any immediate questions that they'd like to ask colleagues on the Zoom meeting? Yes, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. It's more of a sort of statement rather than a question, and apologies, Jan, if I'm repeating myself, because I've raised this at the council meeting, but the maturity spread in the sort of 40 to 50 year period, there's a big lump, about £250 million becomes mature at that point. If interest rates are high at that point, that obviously would put a big financial burden. None of us will be around to see it, but I think you gave the assurance at the council meeting that as further borrowing happens, that it'll be spread so that it's not all maturing at the same time. I just thought it'd be worth mentioning that now, so that it gets sort of minuted and for whoever is around in 40 or 50 years.
Okay, I think yeah. That, unless you wanted to comment on that, Jan, I think it's more of a question just for the minutes, isn't it?
Yes, noted. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on. Anyone just to note that Peter Topping has entered the meeting at this point. So welcome, Peter. Any more questions on this particular report? It seems fairly self-explanatory. I don't have any issues with it myself. No. Okay, well, if that's the case, then this report is just a note, Jan, so we're not going to vote on anything here. This is just for information only.
That's right, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think we can accept that it's been duly noted, and thank you for bringing it to us. Okay, so we'll move on. Agenda item 6. Now, I think that's the end of yours, Jan. Jan's gone. Report of the Acting Chief Internal Auditor. So, Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, this is a regular report which we bring to committee during the year. Following, obviously, we bring our internal audit plan to you as a committee in March each year, and then during the year we bring a report just detailing some of the key outcomes from the work that we've actually done on the plan once it's finalised. The report before committee this morning summarises finalised pieces of work and reports issued between July and November of this year. in the normal way, just providing a summary of what the audit was intended to achieve and the outcomes of that piece of work. I would just draw members' attention to the table which starts on page 43 of the papers, Chair, where just on each side we just give a summary of each piece of work, the objectives, the assurance opinion given, and an idea of the findings of the report, and then a flavour of what's happened since the report was issued. In the normal way, we then talk around where we are told recommendations have been implemented. We then undertake evidence checking to make sure that's the case. So we talk about, summarise the work done on the evidence checking, and then as well as just a little bit of information around some of the other work we've done around programme assurance and grant certification as well, just for information to the committee. But happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Obviously, quite a detailed report, quite a lot of information in here. Happy to talk through any individual pieces of work in there that people want clarification on, and so on. So I'll open the floor up for this. Oh, Peter Topping. Press the red button, Peter.
Right,
That's it.
thank you, Chair. Chair, apologies for being late. I hadn't appreciated you would make such rapid progress. So well done. Because I did actually have a question about borrowing, but obviously the moment has passed. But it was about what they call LOBO borrowing. And whether the council had given any consideration to moving some of the loan from LOBO into the Public Works Loan Committee. But my question on this agenda item is there's some references to carrying out assurance audits on various on the review of grants, and I just wondered if the audit team used subject matter experts to assist them, because the schemes are quite varied. There's bus services and troubled families and so on, and whether they used subject matter experts to assist them in the assurance, or whether it was a very pure audit, if that makes sense. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We haven't needed to use subject matter experts up to this point in time, notwithstanding if we ever did, that would certainly be something we would consider. To date, the certification of the grants is quite a straightforward against the grant conditions, and there's certain conditions attached to every grant which is received, and it's going through to make sure that all of those grant conditions have been met by the provider of that grant funding, to make sure that we've fulfilled all of the obligations that are needed for that grant funding. So it's more that sort of financial grant certification than the outcomes of the particular funding, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay, Peter? Thank you for that. Okay. Just to pick up on the, as you say, the table that's on page 43, Kevin, that continues on. There's several pieces of work which are summarised in there. I noticed we don't have any high or critical recommendations in any of those reports. What's the criteria for a high recommendation, a high level recommendation in an internal audit report? What sort of benchmark is there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It is a subjective process. On page 42 of the papers, there is a table where we give the definitions of each of the classifications. So you're correct, we have a critical, high, medium and low priority recommendations with a flavour of the description that we try to use to categorise the recommendations that we make. It is a subjective process, and it is thinking about what the potential impact of the risk that we identify is, and whether which category it falls into. That when we come up with a recommendation and attach a priority level to that, it goes through our internal quality assurance procedures within the team. It's then reviewed by someone of at least the same grade within the team, but usually higher, before sort of general oversight from the management level before that's issued in a draft report. And then they're all agreed with the service management as well to make sure that we've got the flavour or the priority of the recommendation correct. Chair, there have been occasions where management have argued up. It's not just a case of trying to push recommendations down. So I think it's fair to say that there is a good sort of consideration of issues with management across the piece. But obviously it is a law is more of a nice to have or a desirable recommendation, and then largely attached to the risks which we would foresee. Obviously anything which would be classed as critical we would expect immediate action to be taken to mitigate that the risk would be great to the county council, obviously.
Okay, thank you for that, Kevin. Just for clarity, just so I can get my head around it, how long would an officer have to put right a problem which fell into the high category compared to a medium category one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think whilst there isn't an exact science, I think it would be probably, if we use as a broad idea, a critical, maybe we would expect to see that action taken almost immediately. A high we'd probably expect to see within a couple of months. Medium, maybe 6 months. And then a low being, anything after that, because by definition it's a nice to have. It's an enhancement of the service rather than a major risk. But again, there's no exact science around that, Chair. It would obviously depend on each individual recommendation and the risk attached to it.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. So no recommendation on this little panel, certainly, that you've put in here, actually would be less than 6 months worth of leeway to actually enact it?
Correct.
Okay, that's fine, that's great. Yes, Councillor Towns, you've got a question.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from your discussion, I'm just looking at these 5 titles, one of which at the fire service doesn't require an assurance opinion. So out of 4, the other 4, 3 of them have got a limited assurance opinion, which is defined as weaknesses in the design of or regular non-compliance with key controls, putting the achievement of the organisation's objectives at risk. That doesn't sound like something to celebrate. My interpretation of that is that this is, if you've got 3 out of 4 that are identifying weaknesses and putting key objectives at risk, that's quite concerning to me. Should I be concerned? And whether or not I should be concerned, what is being done to improve this, please?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Towns, I think certainly a limited assurance opinion is not something to be celebrated, to use your words. I think we always bring these reports to committee to give the periodic updates in terms of what we're finding, so that when you receive the annual opinion every May, it's based on this work, and you've already received some of that information during the year. It is possibly unfortunate the way that these pieces of work have landed, that it is 3 out of 4 are limited assurance. We do obviously also have a number of pieces of work which are significant assurance. I think one of the things I would say is that in terms of when I and the team undertake our engagement for putting the work together for our internal audit plan, it's always a very honest engagement with management, and it's usually, or potentially, if there are specific areas where they think improvements may be made, that is a, would you please look at this to help me and make sure that arrangements are correct. But I think once a limited assurance opinion is given, we obviously follow that up in the normal way, and we try to give a flavour of the progress that's been made following the audit being completed. But in addition, for probably about 12 months, or maybe a little bit more now, I now regularly attend the executive management team. Probably every couple of months, I attend the executive management team, which was a measure which the chief executive introduced. And one of the things we talk about is upcoming pieces of work and the ones that have been finalised, as well as any report which was being identified as limited assurance, just to keep track of those and make sure that there is progress being made by the relevant executive director, which I think is a good arrangement, and it's something that executive team monitor at least every 2 months formally in terms of what's happening with progress with any limited assurance reports that have been issued. So I hope that gives some assurance to the committee.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. It does. Okay, well, just to follow up on that, Kevin. Obviously, over the course of a year, internal audit will issue quite a lot of recommendations and all sorts of categories. Do you monitor whether these have been carried out in the time frame that you've set, and what do you do with the ones that have gone over the limit? Because not in a perfect world, everybody would deliver things within the time frame, but they don't always. What do you do with it, and how do you follow these things through?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, we do follow all recommendations. Oh, you're quite correct. And I think you're right. There are obviously some very good business reasons why sometimes recommendations can't be implemented within a given time frame. Wherever that is the case, we don't just take that as read. So we will have a discussion with the management concerned, understand the reasons why an extended target or a revised target date may be required, and form a view on that and potentially agree to that extension of the target date. If we feel that matters aren't being addressed correctly, that would be a matter for me to then escalate through to the relevant executive director, through to executive team more widely, and if I felt matters weren't being addressed or risks were being borne that needn't be, it would be incumbent upon me to bring that to you as an audit committee. That's certainly not the case from what I see. We are obviously at the moment still coming out of a pandemic as well, and obviously there is an unknown factor in terms of service delivery, things being a little bit different for particular services in terms of perhaps implementation of recommendations in a slightly different way to that maybe 2 years ago, where it would have been a bit more part of the normal business, if that makes sense. But
okay, thank you. I mean, just to finish off on that one, have you noticed a slackening off of people keeping to these target dates since the pandemic? Obviously, we've got to cut people as much slack as we possibly can because so much has happened over the last 18 months, but we're a bit concerned, obviously, in case this becomes an excuse which goes on forever, as because of the pandemic, I can't do X, Y, and Z. Have you noticed anything like that?
Thank you, Chair. I think initially, when the pandemic hit, probably yes. So, for example, maybe some recommendations where a service area was required to implement it when the lockdown arrangements hit and people were working on different areas or services closed or so on. Obviously there would be a knock-on effect in terms of the implementation of recommendations. I think we are starting to get back to normal now, Chair, and we have a very good history in terms of when a service explains to us that yes, we've implemented the recommendation, and we then undertake the evidence checks, we find that they are always implemented. So there is a good history there of actually the evidence check and demonstrating that the recommendations have indeed been implemented.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Any more questions before I close this item then? Okay, we're okay. Right, well, thank you, Kevin. I don't think there's anything for us to vote on this. This is for information only, I understand, so thank you for that. Okay, we move on to item 7 now, which is the audit progress report from external auditors, Mazars. So Cameron is here to present that one.
Thanks, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay? I assume you can. I've just noticed we've not actually talked about the 1920 audit action in the progress report, which is an oversight on our part. In terms of 1920, we have 2 pieces of work still to complete. The first is in relation to all the government accounts, which basically flows from the accounts, and that will be done as soon as possible, now that the audit of the accounts is complete. The second point is around about value for money. Jan, this interim section 151, has recently provided us with some more information, including legal opinion. We are currently looking at that and deciding what further procedures we need to undertake to complete the work and report. I think we've mentioned previously the outcome's likely to be qualified, but there is still some debate to be had, I think, around about the international point in particular. In terms of 2021, we got draft accounts from the Council a little while ago. We have commenced the audit work on the 2021 accounts. We've done the initial trail through. Initial work will be focusing on the areas of highest risk, which from our point of view tends to be around about the potential risk of manipulation of the accounts, which applies to all audits, so not specific to Northumberland. Work on the valuation of property, plant and equipment, which you'll probably recall, Chair, was one of the biggest issues last year that held the audit up. and also on pensions, and that's because there's an awful lot of estimation uncertainty and quite a lot of movement in asset values in the last quarter of last year, plus with the added complexity of Northumberland Pension Fund merging into the Tyne-and-Wear Pension Fund to become one big pension fund. I am pleased to say, Chair, that we got the assurance we need from the Pension Fund Auditor. I think it was either late yesterday or early this morning. There are no specifically big issues for Northumberland in there, but there was a 260 million adjustment in the pension fund accounts due to the movement in the final quarter of the year. You probably won't be surprised to hear that £261 million movement is material, and that means there will have to be an adjustment in relation to Northumberland's accounts. Just need to check with Jan to make sure whether or not she already knew about that and put it through the draft or didn't. My gut feeling is didn't, because that was only sort of clarified in September. So basically your accounts will need to be adjusted for the share of the 260 million, which because of Northumberland's size will be quite substantial, I think. Looking at some of the other metropolitan authorities in Tyne-and-Wear, it's material for them, so it will be for you. Beyond that, we set out the timetable. We're still hoping to get the fieldwork complete to be in a position to report through to the Audit Committee in January. My manager keeps telling me that's because I'm a born optimist, which I don't think can be true because I'm an external auditor. But we are nevertheless aiming to get that done, because what we really want to do is try and get Northumberland back onto the position with everybody else, so we're actually doing next year's audit in the summer, which he also probably would shoot me for saying, Chair. At the same time, we're obviously focusing our attention around about the value for money, but worth reminding the committee that it's not a conclusion this year. Where we identify significant weakness, then we must make a recommendation in relation to that significant weakness. And we're busy looking through the issues that we might flag from a risk assessment point of view still, and that's running behind just because 1920 is. In terms of national publications, there are a few there that we think may be of particular interest to the committee. Just picking a couple out. I think if those of you who are interested in cyber and information security and are aware of some of the high profile hacks and ransomware attacks that have taken place across the North East over the last couple of years, so Redcar Council, I think Sunderland University and others stand out. It just is a good guide in terms of, for an audit committee, just to be aware of the risks and the things that you might expect to be in place, and some of the questions you might ask. The other thing I would draw your attention to is number 7 on page 6, which is to do with the completion of 2021 audits. If you look at that briefing, you'll see that 9% of audits were completed by the deadline, by the timetable to publish audited accounts this year, so which was September. That compares to around about 45% by the end of November last year. We understand that completion was around about 20% at the end of October. So despite the obvious intention of moving the timetable forward to September from November, that clearly hasn't quite worked in accordance with the plans, and perhaps not a surprise given the content of the Redmond report, which describes the state of the audit market as it stands at the moment. I wasn't going to say much more than that because we're at a comparatively early stage of the 2021 audit, we're at a comparatively late stage of the 1920 audit, and I'm happy to take any questions from members.
Okay, thank you for that, Cameron. Okay, so I think the best thing is to open this one up. Any questions from the floor? Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, just a general comment. I think we're all frustrated about the delay in signing of the final audit from the previous year. We are quite late, and I think it would be wrong if we actually didn't sort of say that in the committee. I think the explanations we've had several times, and I think we had the same explanation this time in the last committee meeting. So I think it'd be the fair thing to say when can we expect to have it finally put to bed? I think.
Okay, Cameron.
I would hope in the very near future, but my caveat to that comment, Councillor Jackson, would be that we have outstanding queries with officers. There are certain areas where we may need to take legal advice before reaching a conclusion, and then we will have the the process to go through in terms of natural justice, where we are making we are highlighting issues, we are potentially qualifying, and we are potentially making recommendations, that those need to be agreed with both members and officers, subject to the nature of those findings and those conclusions. So that can take some time.
Okay. Well, I think it is a valid point. Without actually being too confrontational about it, the committee, I think, does need to go on record by saying we are aware of the problems that have been attached to all of this, the delays that have been caused, but we are still disappointed actually that it has taken as long as it has. So I think it is worth going on record to say that. But obviously Cameron is working diligently to try and bring us back up to speed with this, and we look forward to seeing the conclusion of this shortly. Okay, do we have any more questions for Cameron before we move on? Any more? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Not obviously a question, I wouldn't want to partake in the discussion, but if you do want a presentation regarding cyber security and so on, then I'm happy to that be provided. That comes under my portfolio, perhaps not broadcast to the whole world so that every Russian hacker and wherever can watch and understand what our preparations are. But it is something that's really important. There are other authorities, as Cameron alluded to, have suffered significant ransom demands, and we're putting measures in place to try our level best, obviously, to avoid any such circumstances.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That's a really useful offer, and I think it's an area that very often people struggle with as to what on earth cyber security actually means and what controls we actually have in that. So that could be a useful thing as an educational thing for us. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask Cameron about you mentioned the impact of the valuation on the pensions. What will that mean for the council I'm guessing increased contributions going forward? No, okay, I was wrong.
So I audit quite a few pension funds in local government across the country. Doesn't make me an expert in pension funds, but I do audit quite a few of them. The final quarter of 2021, so January to March, there was still quite a lot of volatility in terms of the market. So that meant that the returns on investments changed quite a lot, and actually were higher than probably predicted at that point in time. So what happens with a pension fund, and those of you who have been involved in Northumberland Pension Fund in the past, and if Jan's on the call, hopefully Jan will support that, or Andy if he's there too, is that some fund manager valuations you get at the end of March, but the bulk of them tend to be at the end of December. And what happens then is, in practical terms, is cash flow forecasts are used for that final quarter, as essentially to sort of give you an idea of what the valuation is worth at the year end. What happens after that is, all the way through the rest of the year, the council, so South Tyneside Administering Authority, will continue to get updated valuation reports from the fund managers and from the global custodians that exist. And those are still related to the period to the end of March. So those update those cash flow forecasts. In essence, they can be significantly different, depend on the asset return. So what's happened in practical terms, and it looks to me to be across the country, because I do one in Derbyshire, one in Lincolnshire, one in West Yorkshire, and I obviously audit a lot of councils that rely on those, is that the returns have been better than expected. So the letter we've had from EY as a pension fund auditor just highlights the fact that compared to the draft accounts, which are prepared at the point the pension fund has the information, but quite often with that roll forward of the cash flow rather than the actual valuations, can be quite different. So the actual asset values for the pension fund at the year end, I think from recollection, are 261 million different to what were used in the original draft accounts. So essentially what that will mean for anybody that's admitted body, subject to the share of the assets that you have, is that your net liability will have decreased. I've not yet seen a local, actually I think there is one local authority I've ever seen that's got a net surplus on the pension fund liability. So you've got a big number in your accounts that shows that net liability. It's in your pension reserve and actually on your long-term liabilities. That would reduce by that share. And what we need to do is just work through your share versus the 261 to come up with a number. And then there'll have to be a decision and a discussion with Jan around whether actually you need an updated letter from the actuary that sets out the numbers in the accounts. And that, to be honest, it's quite a simple calculation. But we only got that yet. We only got that. It was either late yesterday or early this morning. So hopefully that's explained.
Okay. Jan, I see you on the line. Jan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, well, I think Cameron's, explained it in quite a lot of detail, so I haven't got anything to add to his explanation, but just to say that we did not have the actuaries' updated report at the time the draft accounts were published, so an adjustment will be required. And obviously we'll have discussions with Cameron and his team about what that adjustment should be. But it is a revaluation adjustment, so it affects the balance sheet, but shouldn't affect the council's revenue position, is my understanding.
Okay, Cameron, is that your understanding as well?
That's nearly right, I think, is probably the way we look at it. So we think it hits the remeasurement of the defined benefit liability because it's a movement in the fund valuation. So it would hit the bottom line of your CIS statement. But the impact on that in terms of your actual usable reserves, so, the cash that you've got stashed away that you might use in the future for whatever you're going to use it for, that impact's reversed back out again. So it has no impact on usable reserves of the council, but it does have an impact on unusable reserves, and it does impact in terms of the CIS, we think. But we'll double check that, Jan, and get back to you, but I'm pretty sure that's right based on other clients.
Now, there's a lot of technical accounting speaking there. For those of us
the key thing is
who are maybe slightly rusty in that area.
It doesn't impact on the reserves you've set aside to fund projects or the reserves you've set aside as contingency in case something goes wrong.
Fantastic. That's the good news. That's good. That's a good news story. That's excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you for coming back on that one, Jan. Okay. Any more questions for Cameron while we've got him? No. Okay, well, this report is just for us to note, so there's nothing to vote on here. So thank you for presenting it, Cameron, and we'll draw that one to a conclusion. So if we check the agenda, I think we're now on to number 8, urgent business. Well, I haven't been made aware of any urgent business that we need to bring up here, so that one we'll pass on. Thank you, Andrew. We'll come to the conclusion of the public part of this meeting. The date of the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, the 26th of January. The public meeting will start at 10:15, but we'll have the in-camera meeting for the members at 9:30 before that, as usual. Okay, so we now move on to part 2 of this meeting. So it's expected that matters included in this part of the agenda will be dealt with in private. Reports referred to are enclosed for members on the pink forms and are for officers, members and officers only. They're coloured pink and marked for not for publication. We'll have exclusion of press and public on this, so we will be switching off the YouTube stream as well. Under the usual section 100A of the Local Government Finance Act, the press and public are going to be excluded. So, but we do have to take a vote on that to make sure that we're in agreement that we will do that. So can I have a show of hands? Okay, good, that's agreed. Thank you very much. So I'll now ask our technician if he can switch the live stream off, please.